I'd like to call the village board meeting of Monday, July 18th to order. And we will start with roll call. Trustee Booker,
Here.
Trustee Johnson,
Present.
Trustee Owens,
Here.
Trustee Quirk, Trustee Sechrest,
Here.
Trustee Thompson, President Montgomery, present. And we would invite you to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. The first item on our agenda, number 3, is persons desiring to be heard. Do we have anyone? Okay. The next item on our agenda is reports from elected officials and staff, and that is in our packets. Are there any questions on those reports or comments from any of the trustees? If not, we will accept them as presented. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of our minutes from June 20th, 2022, consideration of appointment for Randy Jennings to the CDA, consider approval of assignment and assumption of development agreement, consider approval of form of estoppel certificate, consider approval of termination of storm drainage easement. All of those items, the last 3, C, D, and E, are in your packet related to the Bevy property. I don't know if there are any questions about any of those items. Trustee Owens?
Just had a question on consider approval of termination of storm drainage easement. So what happens when you do that? I mean, can they actually build on that part or anything or not? Or?
So it actually is an old easement that previously conveyed stormwater from the neighborhood. We redirected that as part of the original village streetscape project in 2013, and so now the stormwater is rerouted in a different fashion. So it's just an old kind of legal document that has no purpose for us anymore, and it's a cleanup as part of the sale of the Bevy property. So typically, when you have an easement, you don't want to build in the easement, or you at least want to acknowledge that it's there and warn people that if you do build in the easement, it's subject to risk if we need to get into that space and do work. In this case, we knew it wasn't there. They went ahead and built their development on top of that easement already, and now the paperwork is just cleaning it up after the fact.
Any other questions? Trustee Booker?
It's not about the consent agenda, but the minutes are posted on. If they're in the packet.
They're on there. A, consideration.
Okay.
Yeah.
The minutes?
Consideration of minutes, June 20th.
Oh, okay. Okay. Nothing.
All right. Any other questions? If not, Trustee Thompson, if you have a question. If not, can we entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion we approve the consent agenda as presented, A through E.
It's been moved by Trustee Quirk and second by Trustee Thompson to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes carry it unanimously. Thank you. Under new business, A, consider approval of contract to Mid-City Corporation for the 2022 water system adjustment project. And I think, we have 2 items. Kurt, I'm assuming you're going to speak to both, A and B? All right. Oh.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Dunick with City Water, and we're the
Sorry
contract.
about that, Tom. I called you Kurt. Probably because Kurt is on my mind with the...
All right, so my name is Tom Dunick with City Water. We're the contract managers and operators for the water utility. So in your packet is a bid tab from our 2022 water system adjustment project. And this project is adjusting our 8-inch water main that is on State Trunk Highway 57 by Schrader Drive. They're going to be putting in some big signal poles going right on top of where our existing water main is. So we have to offset around those locations, and then also replacing some infrastructure around the village, some valves that we've determined that aren't working anymore, and some hydrants as well through our maintenance project that we've identified that need to be replaced. So at the end of June, on June 30th, we opened up public bids. We received 2 bids from pre-qualified contractors, and Mid-City Corporation was our low bidder for the project at $78,800. And it was just under our engineer's estimate of about $80,000 for the project. So on July 12th at our Water Commission meeting, the Commission did approve award of the contract to Mid-City Corporation for $78,800. And the work is included in our 2022 approved budget with the utility. It was part of our capital improvement program for water main relay. And so it's coming out of our reserve for construction fund. So my recommendation in the packet was to approve the contract from Mid-City. Anybody else? Any questions?
Any questions? If not, we do need a motion to approve the contract.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
It's been moved by Trustee Sechrist and second by Trustee Booker to approve the contract to Mid-City Corporation for the 2022 Water System Adjustment Project for the $78,800. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. The next item is discuss the simplified rate case with the Public Service Commission for water rate increase.
So for those of you who were not with us back in 2019 when we went through our conventional rate case with the Public Service Commission, part of that, I guess, philosophy when we went ahead and raised the rates, it had been 7 years before we did a rate increase. So we ended up with about a 14% rate increase at that particular point in time. And we said instead of doing these once every 5 to 7 years, doing a big rate case, after this conventional rate case, we'll do what's called a simplified rate case, which at the time was a 3% increase in our revenues once a year. And so a little bit more palatable for our consumers to handle as opposed to one big increase. Well, with the rising cost of inflation and the supply chain issues and whatnot, the PSC has identified or has raised the simplified rate case from 3% to 4.5% to give utilities a little bit more money to help pay for that increased cost of product. So again, at our July 12th meeting for the Water Commission, they went ahead and approved the filing for a simplified rate case with the Public Service Commission. It would increase our rates 4.5%, which would add an additional about $86,000 to the utility revenue for next year. And so what does that mean to our residential customers? Well, for an average residential customer that uses about 12,500 gallons per quarter, they would see an increase of about $2.45 per quarter, so just a little under $10 for the year. So we felt that was a lot more palatable than going through, like I said, with a big rate increase. And last year, when we filed our PSC annual report, our rate of return was about 2.82%, and the benchmark for utilities at 5%. And so this rate increase should get us to a rate of return we're hoping just under 4%. So we're getting close to that benchmark rate of return, which is what we had always kind of anticipated that we would do with these simplified rate cases.
Now, when would this go into effect?
So we would file this sometime in August, mid-August. We'd publish in the newspaper. We're required to publish first, so that would go in the, I think, mid-August newspaper, and then we would file the rate case, and that's be implemented like 45 days after we file. So we could do a proration starting at the middle of fourth quarter, but it's really going to start at the beginning of December. So we'll see this increase happen all next year.
Trustee Owen?
Yeah, question, of course, you said lower rate of return was mainly due to the cost of the water main break and Brownsville Road due to the construction project. Who paid the water main?
So as part of the construction project last year on Brown Deer Road, we had, I think, about 5 water main breaks as part of that project. One was directly a result of the contractor digging in an area where he should not, and that invoice has gone to the contractor as part of the project. So they'll pay that cost back to us. But the rest of them are paid for by the utility. So it's not something that they directly did as, where they hit our main where it wasn't marked or something. This one was just a result of all the work that was being done out there.
Trustee Thompson? Any other questions? Trustee Johnson?
The question related to, you mentioned inflation and other costs going up. At some point in time, will we see a decrease potentially, or will this be something that will carry on possibly every 2 years, 3 years? We'll see an additional increase.
That's a really good question, and if I knew the answer to it, we'd be able to win the lottery too. But no, so I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So we have a lot of money coming from the federal government as part of the infrastructure bill. Right now, it's a hard time for us to get product. In fact, for the 2020 water system adjustments, we pre-purchased all of the material so that we would have it on hand and would be able to do it in the time frame that the DOT wanted us to. Because our suppliers are telling us that things are 6 to 8 months out, and we haven't seen any of that money from the federal government hit the marketplace yet. So once that hits us, we have all these lead services to replace for other communities, not for Brown Deer. So there's just a lot of money that's going to hit this industry over the next couple of years, and I don't see the supply chain issue becoming better anytime soon. I think it's going to get worse, and so it's going to drive the rates up.
Other questions? If there are no other questions, this is just a discussion.
That's correct. So the other thing I was just going to mention was in your packet also, I did put together a list of community water rates from other areas, from other communities that also get surface water from Lake Michigan. And so you can see that while Brown Deer is listed as number 3rd, they're really number 2 because Menominee Falls doesn't charge a public fire protection fee as part of their utility bill. It's part of the taxes in Menominee Falls. So it's not comparing apples to apples, but our rates are extremely affordable when you look at a lot of the other communities in the area. So we're pretty proud of that, and I think that we can keep it down into where we're obviously one of the lower 5 communities, over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is consider authorization to sign release of Monsanto class action lawsuit and utilization of funds. Tyler, are you going to you or Nathan?
I'll just do one clarity. So items C and D are going to be linked to each other. For the item C, I'll have Attorney Nathan Baer speak to that, and then we'll kick it over to Matthew on item D.
Thank you. So the packet included a memorandum that I tried to set up as sort of a question and answer, some questions that you might have concerning this process, and I'll just hit some of the highlights there. So how this really comes about is, and I'm going to simplify a little bit and summarize, but Monsanto is a manufacturer of PCPs, and they get into the waterways, they've gotten into the waterways around the entire country, and they've infected those waterways in much the same way and impacted them much in the same way. So there's a group of lawyers that represent a series of plaintiffs, and this particular class action lawsuit is out in California, and they come forward to the court and they say, there are other similarly situated municipalities and plaintiffs around the country, so instead of trying this case 40 times, 50 times, 500 times, or 1,000 times in all states around the country, What we'd like to do is we would like permission to represent a class of municipalities that have been impacted in a similar way. And there's a formal process that they have to go through. They have to meet certain criteria, and the judge says yay or nay. In this particular case, they said yes. And so the next part of that process is they put individuals on notice that may otherwise be part of that class. So they'll send out those flyers. You probably get them at home once in a while. Did you ever use this credit card at a particular place, or did you ever, do you want to opt in or opt out? You might get 25 cents, and the rest goes to the plaintiff's lawyers. But in this particular case, it's a little more complex, and it's a little more significant than that. The class was approved, and a number of the municipalities in Milwaukee County that are on the Milwaukee River and the Menominee River were named in that class. And there is a formula that they came up with. The lawyers for the plaintiffs said, okay, now that we have this class, we're going to propose a settlement with Monsanto, who's going to pay literally hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's going to get distributed to all of these communities. And I can't pretend to know how they came up with the formulas that they used for these. I was told that Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee, ended up with, I don't know if you heard this, like $5,600 or something like that, but the county got $1.6 million, I think, under the formula. And so I think the city's going to be opting out. But yeah, they're going to sue. But so the question then becomes, do we want to be bound by the terms of the proposed settlement, or do we want to say, we have some unique injury here that would warrant stepping away from that settlement and opting out and pursuing it on our own? And I think there's a lot of reasons, not to do that. Ultimately, that's your call here. But if we opt out, we may be able to pool with some other communities, perhaps Milwaukee. But it's a long, long road, and you're looking at, and especially in a case like this where there's a lot of complex issues involving contamination, product liability, and how did that impact the waterway. You're talking about experts that charge into the, not hundreds, but potentially thousands of dollars an hour, and fronting those costs in the litigation like this can go on for years and years. And there's no guarantee at the end of the day that the compensation is going to be any different or more. So there's got to be some good reason to opt out, and there would have to be something unique about the situation, that would apply. I've talked to the attorneys for Mequon and River Hills, and Shorewood has decided not to opt out. I don't believe there's any of the other communities in the North Shore area that have elected to opt out. Now, there's a formula, and I've tried to run the numbers myself, and I also talked to Andrew Skiarski, who's a Shorewood resident but is an attorney that's representing a firm that may be working with Milwaukee on it. And they've run the numbers for all the North Shore communities using the same formulas. And we estimate that the total amount that we would get under that settlement, depending on, now this is impacted depending on how many opt out and other things that happen, but probably in the neighborhood of about $280,000. So if we do nothing, that's the amount the village will receive. In my opinion is that based upon the chances of the municipality ever having to, be ordered to do a cleanup by the DNR or any state or federal agency, and weighing that against the $280,000 payment, and weighing that against what it would cost to opt out, and then trying to project, well, what will we recover maybe 5, 10, 12 years down the road, that taking the $280,000 is probably the way to go. Now, the other good news there is there's no limits on the funds. In exchange for the money, what you'd have to do is you sign a release, and that means that in the future you can't sue them for contamination of your waterways as a result of their PCPs. Now, that's only Monsanto and its subsidiaries that would be released. Any other potentially responsible parties are not part of that settlement. So, unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back over to the manager.
Are there questions from anyone?
so we're just gonna hop into item D, and then if you could do a motion on C and D, 'cause they are linked hand in hand. So we just so happen to have a project that fits beautifully in the 280,000 that we would receive through a state municipal agreement for the Beaver Creek Bridge. So I'll have Matthew just summarize that project real quick, and then if there's any questions on either items, we're happy to answer those.
So within Brown Deer, we have 4 bridges that are under our responsibility. We have a bridge on 66th Street, just south of Brown Deer Road, over Beaver Creek. One on 64th Street, over south of Brown Deer Road, again over Beaver Creek. We have 2 on 51st Street. One is south of Dean, north of Bradley, and that's over South Branch Creek. And then we have the one in question on 51st Street here, right by the dance studio and the bike trail on 51st Street, again over Beaver Creek. So all of our bridges annually are inspected by a structural engineer, and then that report gets submitted to the state. So as can be expected, bridges over time, there are repairs that need to be made, and then they don't last forever, so eventually they need to be replaced. North 51st Street over Beaver Creek is such a bridge that has reached its useful life. It's now on a 6-month monitoring program. There's nothing unsafe, you can still drive over it, but it is just being monitored more closely now that it is reaching the end of its useful life. So currently, the current structure is a dual-cell box culvert, and 2 of the wing walls are tipping in such a fashion that we're just kind of monitoring its movement, and then the bridge, though, does need to be replaced soon. And so what we ended up doing, we were going to include this project in our CIP, but ahead of time, I went out and we attempted to get funding for the project, so we submitted it through the DOT Structure Replacement Program, and we were awarded funding. So it's an 80-20 split. Brown Deer would be on the hook for $240,000. And then as we were putting that together, lo and behold, within the last, week or 2, Tyler, this Monsanto project came about, and it's a pretty perfect fit between the 2.
So the total project cost is almost 1.2 million.
Yep. But Brown Deer's portion, the state would pay the rest. We would only pay that approximately $240,000. And then this would include some stream improvements and stuff upstream and downstream as part of that project. But
And then I would just add the project is 2024, so it will allow us some time to be able to receive the funds. If for some reason we're getting near the end of 2023 and we haven't received the funds from the lawsuit yet, that's where we would need to rehuddle to identify a strategy, but this gives us time to be able to get those funds for it.
And the DOT funding, I think, expires in 2029. So we do have between 2024 and 2029 to use funds.
Hope that the bridge goes down.
Yeah, right. Well, that too. Right. That's a good point.
Attorney Beard, did you have something?
I just wanted to be clear too, though, that you should be prepared to go forward with that project on its own merits one way or another, because I can't promise you. I mean, I've seen weird things happen in litigation, and until the ink is dry and the check clears, I just, and there's a million other things that can happen. This is what should happen, but I just want to be clear that until that check is literally in hand and I see it and it's cashed, I just want to be clear that, I don't want to count the proverbial chickens before they're hatched.
Trustee Brooks and then Trustee Owens.
So we would plan on doing the bridge in 2024, and then that would show up in the CIP that we'd look at next month. That'd be done in just one construction season, a couple months.
Trustee Owens?
What the attorney said, like I said, the 2 separate things, anytime you go with the company, it's not 100% guaranteed. Just look for the time for that. Get this money from Monsanto.
I assume then we would shift that funding that we had set or borrowed to a different project, right?
Other questions? Trustee Johnson?
I have more of a comment, but I'm definitely in agreement with the other trustees. This is a company that I'm familiar with because there was a brown site in the city of Milwaukee, and it took almost over $3 million to clean up the site. And so I think that's why the city has stepped aside, because it impacted the city very largely. So I think if we have the opportunity to get these dollars, I think we should go after those dollars. But earmark them for this project if the money comes in.
Well, we won't have to go after them. If we opt out, we'd have to do something. But otherwise, this is kind of projected. There's no guarantee, but it's projected from that amount. Other questions? If there are no other questions, there is a recommended motion in the request for consideration.
I move to authorize the village manager to sign the lease of the Monsanto class action lawsuit and utilize the funds to complete the bridge over Beaver Creek on North 51st Street.
Trustee Quirk?
Didn't we just agree to separate the two?
No, this is them both together.
Yeah, so item D then will be actually, Matthew has the attached SMA, the state municipal agreement. So the second motion would be approving that agreement.
Yeah, to approve the state municipal agreement with DOT.
So,
But if you wanted to remove from the recommended motion and utilize the funds to complete the bridge, and still then do the motion that Matthew recommended, that would suffice for staff as well.
so
if you want to if you want to do a friendly amendment to that, I've gotten the direction I need. I think Matthew does as well.
Correct.
So you can just revise it just to authorize capital
I move to authorize the village manager to sign the release of the Monsanto class action lawsuit.
It's been moved by Trustee Thompson and second by Trustee Quirk to authorize the village manager to sign release of the Monsanto class action lawsuit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you. And so we don't need to do anything on it.
So that's good. So now we need a motion approving the state municipal agreement, which would be the recommended motions on page 49.
Yeah. Let's see.
Make a motion, we approve the state municipal agreement for the North 51st Street Bridge replacement, Beaver Creek Bridge.
It's been moved to approve the state municipal agreement by Trustee Quirk and second by Trustee Thompson. Is all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to consider approval of an alcohol beverage retail Class A and Class C license application for the sale of fermented malt beverages and wine at Urban Beach, located at 5091 West Brown Deer Road. Attorney Bear.
Thank you, President Montgomery. I just noticed this afternoon when I was reviewing the packet that, but before I say this, do we have anyone here on behalf of the applicant by chance?
I don't
No.
think so.
I did notice that it was a restaurant, and the Type A license would allow them to sell beer only for off-site consumption, but the Class C license would allow them to sell wine for on-site consumption. And I think someone may have accidentally checked the wrong box,
Okay.
and maybe what they wanted was the B, but we don't have anybody here from them to know.
Yeah.
So I'd hate to issue them a license they don't need, but obviously it wouldn't be appropriate to amend the request without anybody here. So I just wanted to point that out, that I'm pretty sure somebody that was gonna open a restaurant probably doesn't want to sell beer for off-site consumption, but then wine for on-site. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we took any action if we wanted to. I'm not sure if we could defer or,
Set it aside
or
for
you could,
next time.
sure, or what you could do so they could get going is possibly consider approval of the Class C, but defer the A, because my guess is
Well-
they probably don't want the A.
Except, what is this is, the 18th of July, so we don't meet again until August 1st.
When are they opening?
Yeah, we don't know. I know they've been recruiting, trying to hire. Nate, do you know when have they projected the opening?
They were targeting this month, but they are kind of easing into soft opening. So I'm pretty confident that they now take away they can use their restaurant.
Right.
And the applicant was confused in the email from me earlier today thinking that it was assuming self-service. But there was going to be a
So, Attorney Bear.
Oh, thank you. So again, maybe what you could do is consider the Class C, and then maybe defer the request on the A, and that way that would give them the opportunity, if you see fit to pass it, it would give them the opportunity
At least
to
get
sell
part of it.
the wine, because even if you approve the A, they still can't have beer for sales on site anyway, so it's not gonna be any worse.
Right. Okay. Trustee Quirk?
I mean, I assume we wouldn't allow them to carry out alcoholic beverages for the restaurants anyway, right?
I mean, unless you gave them the A.
We haven't let
Right, yeah,
anyone
I
else
mean-
do that.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, but we can't adjust their application.
Right,
They need,
right.
they need to do
Yeah.
it.
But we
So,
can adjust our, motion.
approval, yes.
Correct.
So, is anyone able to make the motion for the Class C?
I'll make a motion to approve the license application for, distributing Class C.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Secret and second by trustee Thompson to approve alcohol beverage retail Class C license for, Urban Beat at 1591 West Brown Deer Road. When you make the motion, make sure you include, so for the record, that we include all of that information. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, and I'm assuming staff will go back to them and clarify. So motion carries. The next item is item F, consider approval of co-sponsoring Brown Deer Foundation Car Show on August 20th and approval of transient and temporary outdoor entertainment permits.
Thank you, President Montgomery. The Brown Deer Foundation has been coordinating this for a few months. Seeing this as a new event and they would be utilizing village space, I wanted to bring this to the board to get your approval. So the memo spells out everything as far as the village commitment would be. I had them also apply for that permit. Us as a co-sponsor, if you approve us as a co-sponsor, we would entertain waiving the fee application for the permit. But basically the car show will be multiple hours on August 20th in the village lot. One of the things that will be going on that time is at the pond, the dog swim. So we have coordinated the map to make sure that the two don't interfere with each other and there's still adequate parking for those wanting to use the pond for the dog swim. FIS will be offering their lot for general parking to the event and be blocked off at certain locations to allow for food trucks and just additional space. But in the bullets, I have the different commitments that us as a co-sponsor would offer the foundation. So revenue is really hard to project, but They're hoping, roughly about, 5, 10 or so thousand on up in revenue, whether it's the 50/50 raffle. If you're showing a car, there would be an entrance for that, and then just sponsors for the event that would pay money to be a sponsor. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on behalf of the foundation.
Any questions? Trustee Jones?
Have you looked at the impact it would be on the village itself, being a co-sponsor? Can we add a dollar amount value to what we're giving the foundation?
I mean, we could definitely come up with something. I mean, there's some, for a previous event when they would do the deer run, because that took up so much staff time, we would charge, our services for police officers or just to be present for the event. This event actually probably has less staff time. We still plan on having a presence at the event, but just because a lot of our time isn't needed to do the setup in that, compared to previous, we would not be charging time. But, DPW is probably the main one here where staff time to get the picnic tables, the porta-johns, barricades. I mean, there's definitely, in the hundreds as far as staff time to help. As far as energy and hooking up to the electric power, I don't think that would be much. But I don't know, Matthew, probably staff time probably in the hundreds in your department to do that.
It's a Friday morning setup, couple guys, couple hours, so $200.
And then a little staff time as far as helping them communicate through our communication channels. So that would kind of be the price tag I would put on it.
So you say that we put some liability, something that happened to one of those cars, just accident, is that been accounted for?
Yep, liability coverage. We've done a request through CIVMIC, and for that additional coverage, and the foundation is paying the village for that amount. And then for the car dealers who are showing their cars, I think the foundation plans on having them sign like a non-waiver for their participation.
Other questions? Trustee Court?
So the foundation isn't gonna purchase an additional special event rider for this event?
Say that again?
The foundation is not intending to produce or to pay for an additional special event rider insurance from someone else?
No.
Property damage or anything? So it's
No.
just gonna piggyback with an extension from CIVMIC?
Correct.
And that would cover damage to collectible cars?
Well, the non-waiver that they would say, I think that's part of the non-waiver that they're signing, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And I think the hope is that certainly the owners are right there with their cars too. And the recommendation is that they're spaced, within you get 2 spots. Yeah. But, other questions? Trustee Booker.
So, who's coordinating this? And will it be just somebody that's gonna coordinate this whole thing?
The foundation.
The foundation.
Is there a person?
Yeah, well, Marge has kind of taken the lead, but there's others like, Franny Robinson. There's like 4 or 5 foundation members who are non-village individuals who have been coordinating these efforts, and they've been meeting bi-weekly, coordinating it. Trustee Owens, thank Trustee Owens, because this is really, an expertise that he has. He's joined a few of the recent calls to help them, just with some additional knowledge of car shows and that, so.
Other questions? If not, we do need a motion to approve the village to be a co-sponsor of the Brown Deer Foundation Car Show on August 20th.
I move for the Village of Brown Deer to be a co-sponsor for the Brown Deer Foundation Car Show on August 20th.
Is there a second? been moved by trustee Thompson and second by trustee Secret to approve the village to be a co-sponsor of the Brown Deer Foundation Car Show on August 20th. Any questions, further questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item G, discuss 2023 budget expectations and schedule. I believe that's you, Tyler.
Yes, thank you. So for the next up to 15 minutes, I was hoping that we could kind of do like a roundtable, just getting some general thoughts on your expectations with the upcoming budget. One of the items you identified, in my evaluation was for additional opportunity to weigh in the budget. So before we even start the process, I want to make sure that I outlined what the upcoming budget will look like, what some of the factors are involved with that, and then let you see what the schedule will be that we will do our best to stick to as staff. So I don't want to take too much time summarizing the memo, but I put together some different specific challenges for the 2023 budget that we need to be mindful about. So you can see that, and then you can see the schedule that we have outlined, which will allow us to have a public hearing and adoption of the 2023 budget considered by November 21st. So I outlined some 4 questions that I was curious to get your reaction to. So if we wanted to just go around, and whether you wanted to weigh in on one of them or all 4 or none, up to you as a board, but I think that general feedback would be helpful for me so that when we start working with staff on the budget process, I can use those notes.
And so in order to give everyone an opportunity to respond to each question, I can read each one and maybe we just go through each person, and whatever comments you have, you can add. The first question is, are there any general services or operations you'd like staff to review or reflect differently in the budget? And maybe we can start with our Finance and Public Works Chair.
It's going to save some time. I read through the entire document. I think this is going to be a process as we start navigating our way through this. Questions probably will arise, but as a construct, it looks good to me. I am concerned somewhat about inflation, how that's going to affect the salaries, potential salaries. Because as I read this, 2% would have been historically budgeted, but I'm not sure if that's what you're looking to do or what you're proposing something else. And then of course you're going to do this, you got to balance it. So, it looks the whole thing looks good to me. Nothing jumped out at me that gave me pause. So we can go through each one, but I'm just giving you my 2 cents.
So I think he's wanting to get each one of us what your comments might be. So the question is, are there any general services or operations you'd like staff to review or reflect differently in the budget? Okay. Trustee Secret.
I just wanted to, I looked at the whole thing too, and I guess just the process in itself, coming from the county and that, departments were usually given a target to reach. And it seems like I kind of echo with what Renee is saying about the 2% and the increases and things like that. And it seems like from the budgets that I've seen in the past, it's like, well, the department tells you what they want, and the board pretty much just goes ahead and says, okay. Whereas, in other municipalities,
to the departments. It's up to the departments to meet that target. Then they come to the board. If they can't meet it, then they justify why they can't meet it or what other things, and then there's an adjustment made to it. So I don't know if that process is here or not.
Just to kind of speak to this, what he's referring to is in the past, the executive branch would create the initial budget. And it's passed on to the board with analysts who go through and they get into detail in terms of what the executive branch is asking for, and then they would make changes. We have hearings on it. And then the board would approve a amended budget, and it'll go back to the executive branch, who either would then approve it or make additional changes. But generally, by the time it goes past that second process, the budget's really being carved out. Here, we don't have that second piece where we would send it to an analyst. I mean, I could do it, but that's not what I'm here to say.
Tyler had a comment.
Yeah, great question. When I started my career in Johnson County, Kansas, which is in the Kansas City metropolitan area, they use a very similar process. From my intel, I think larger municipalities or public agencies, that's a very common practice, because when you're looking at department budgets, they're very, compared to us, they're very large. I mean, they're almost their own organization in itself in a way. While here, there's some departments that, I mean, it's not even 100,000. So if you're going to ask to, keep it, neutral, or let's say nothing exceeding at 2%, and with some inflation costs, their only option might be cutting personnel to like 0.75 FT instead of a full FT, and that's their only option. So a lot of municipalities, the smaller municipalities, especially in Wisconsin, what typically they do, and you'll see that's what I'm kind of getting at with question 2, is kind of gauge what the board's appetite would be with a general levy increase. That gives the manager an idea as far as what your appetite would be. Departments will submit, what they would like the budgets to be, and that's going to give us a general number, and it's going to be much higher than the number you give, general number you would give. And then I would work with the department heads as a team to collectively figure out some solutions to get it down to what you would like to see it at. So that's kind of a process that some of the smaller municipalities utilize, just because there's not a whole lot of flexibility at the department level to, to potentially, move around allocations or cut personnel costs.
Okay. Trustee Owens, will you? Yep. Trustee Thompson? Trustee Quirk?
So, one thing that I'm concerned about is maintaining our website and messaging appropriately and timely to the public. And I think you have this well in hand, because we're looking to hire a marketing person. But the marketing person will also double, if I understand it correctly, as a front desk person. And I'm concerned that maybe those are 2 people and not 1.
Okay.
To ask someone to have the skills to manage a small budget and to make some marketing decisions and maintain the website and, be in charge of messaging and a lot of, whatever communication we send out. To do all that and to answer phones all day long, part of the day?
And they would be the backup, but in periods of time that they would be the primary person, because your first person would be gone. Definitely understood.
Right now, we don't have a front desk person, do we?
Oh, we do have a deputy clerk right now with us.
Okay. And so would the phones and the office be maintained, shared responsibility between those 2?
Yeah, so the vision is you have a deputy clerk that would be the primary person, so it's a deputy clerk admin assistant, and then the other person that's up there is a marketing communications coordinator, who could be full-time or part-time. We're going to post it as both. It'll actually be posted this week, just to let the board know. And then we do have some additional support with, if you met Diane, during the transition, Diane was someone that helped when we had a bunch of vacancies. So we've had her working on an as-needed basis to help with that added coverage when we've needed it. That's kind of been the trio. I mean, anyone in the back also will be, is trained working the front desk. In the summers, it gets difficult with vacations and that, but once we get by that period, it's everyone helps at the front. So,
Okay.
but we can definitely have a much larger conversation with our staff as far as ways that we can navigate that to try to make sure that the marketing communications person can fully have as much time as possible working on those initiatives.
Yeah, because I'm not sure, I mean, the person who has those skills may not be the same person, to answer phones.
Sure.
And so that makes me concerned about another.
You are definitely right.
staff.
I think for someone who needs to be in a good idea of what's being talked about in the community, and that I could make the argument that even answering phones or to the front desk is good for them, so they can even I did part of that today, and some of the phone calls, I received, it was good for me to know, like, what are some of the things that people are needing help with. So for the person that's being the first respondent on some of these marketing communications initiatives, I think some support in that capacity will help them be better at their job. But yeah, I mean, if the front counter starts dominating the time for them, that is problematic, I would agree. And I agree sometimes the skill sets don't, necessarily go hand in hand, but yeah, that's where we'll get a better idea through our recruitment process what those skill sets will be.
It's just a concern.
Okay, perfect.
Trustee Johnson?
I guess for me, it's a number of things. I guess the first one being is the number of calls you get per day. Is there a log of calls that we take in, so you don't keep it all?
No.
Because I know sometimes within the office, everybody pitches in to help out, and it sounds like that's what's happening here. So when it comes to the number of calls, I think internally, whatever judgment you think is best to handle those calls, I would favor that.
Well, to answer your call log question, I think there's like a report we could spit out that would end up showing us the amount of calls, but there's not like an active one that we get a call and we're keeping a tally and know what the call would be. So it's not like we could do a diagram to show what the calls are about, but I think we could show what the call volume is.
We've done
Right.
that. We've done that historically. About a year and a half ago, when we had Angela and Elizabeth, we did track that for a couple of 2-week periods, because there's ebbs and flows during the year, of course, tax time and so forth. So we can very easily just kind of track call volume and topic, general questions or things of interest as we go over a period of time. But I don't know if that record was kept from the last time we did it. There's been a lot of turnover in the admin side.
Yeah, I think that may be interesting just to share with us at some point in time.
Okay.
The other thing is capital improvements. There are certain things that we should be looking at as far as capital improvements. I know we've been talking about the phone system as one of those capital improvements. There's other things internally that you think are important that could make your job easier, make the village more in tune with the residents that we should be focusing on?
I'll be happy to talk about that August 1st when we have the CIP, because there are some areas where I feel like we have been lacking, so that'll be part of that presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing, just for me, I don't know if other trustees want to say, just the history of how we have done with the budget based on the assessment increase. Are we hitting that budget? Are we over expending? What does that look like for the past 5 years?
I just want to be super clear, like a history of like what the levy increase has been?
Yes.
Okay.
Along with the
Yeah.
expenditures.
Yeah, so one of the nights we'll do general fund and a general summary, so I'll make sure in the general summary of the budget, before we start going into detail, I'll provide that historical overview, which will include the history of the levy increases, what they've been over the years.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think for me, as I think about general services or operations, um, and we may not be able to do this year. We may have to wait till the next, because we won't have a full year. We have new positions. And how do we really see how those are working over time? I think we've had people, but their functions have not been the same. And I'm thinking about Gosha's position was not here. I don't think. No.
It was converted. So
Right.
the position today was not what it was
Right.
before her.
And a marketing PR person.
Right.
So, from a budget standpoint, we'll see that right now, but we won't have a full year until probably the following year.
Yeah.
But to really look and make sure that we have the right positioning and that they're functioning the way the village needs them to function.
Okay.
And do we need anything additional?
Okay.
And in terms of how they're reflected in the budget, and I'm sure you probably have, and maybe we'll see a new org chart, like who reports to who.
I got that. Yeah, that was one of the first things I did because it helped me make sense of everything going on. So,
Right.
That's one of the things that we'll make sure to put in the presentation for you for the budget that can capture that. That would be something that should be just good to have as a summary in the budget document.
Right.
Yeah.
The second question is, do you have any specific, and this is for trustees, do you have any specific expectations as to the levy increase staff reflects in the initial proposed budget? Please note any proposed budget incorporating a levy increase similar to previous years at the current rate of inflation will come with challenges without changing service levels. And so our previous levy limits were what, like 2%?
Levy increases in the past?
Yeah.
I mean, you've had some years where it wasn't even 1%.
Okay.
And I talked if you read the levy limit challenges, that's been the biggest factor.
Yeah.
That's tied to net new construction, and you've had some previous years where it was neutral or even negative. So because of that, Michael and previous staff had no flexibility to do anything, and he had to do some maneuvering just to get under the levy limit, and he had to be really creative. So, we have some limitations as far as between the levy limit and not this year with the expenditure restraint program, but in a perfect world, we'll learn about that later. But in a perfect world, what would be your expectations that when we're putting together that, budget, what would be your appetite for a levy increase? And maybe it's not a specific percentage. Maybe it's just we want a budget that maintains services. I mean, that could be an answer to this if you would want that.
Trustee Booker.
Okay. I mean, I tried to preface this when I made my first comment that this is going to ebb and flow. My expectation, though, is that as you got a lot of challenges, you're making changes, you're creating positions, you're hiring staff, and there's specific needs you're going to need. My expectation is that working with your new treasurer, you bring us a budget that gives it your best representation of what levy limits need to look at if you want to fund the things you want to articulate in your budget protection. Okay. And then this is one thing that didn't happen before. We would get a budget that was done. We were told what it is. We vote on it, and that's the end of it. In this process, I'm looking to bring us a budget. We'll step through that process, have the dialogue, talk about issues that are germane to each of us, things that we think, for those that have been here, would be helpful. But at the end of the day, sure, you have to operate within that budget. My expectation is working as a team, with your team, you would bring us a representation of what you think that is, what levy limits you would need to be able to actually meet the targets, the goals you want to set for yourself. And we can't articulate that tonight because we haven't seen it all.
Yeah.
But what I don't want to see happen is when we get to the end of the year, well, this is
So, just to respond to that, there's gonna be a few sessions in October that you're gonna receive the, the presentations of the proposed budget, and that's where we're looking for board reaction. So, during those presentations, if there's certain, obviously, if you have questions, we can help clarify, but if there's certain things that you want staff to further review or potentially change, that's where we're gonna be managing a list. And then when we bring back a modified proposed budget for you in November, it will hopefully reflect a lot of those things discussed in October. Okay.
And in this document tonight, that schedule is actually listed. And as what we have done in the past, we've had 3 independent budget meetings that were separate from our board meetings. This time, they're incorporated in our regular board meetings, unless for some reason we have to have something additional. But right now, they're scheduled to be on our regular budget board meetings.
So if I can clarify, October 3rd and 17th, there'll be a little longer meetings because we're going to be doing business along with that. And then depending on how much other business we're seeing for those meetings, if we feel like we can't do all that in those nights, October 10th would be a special meeting that we would do where we would still divide it into 3 sessions. But, to allow for some efficiency both from a staff perspective and for your schedules, I want to try to meet that if we can. So that's at least the current vision as it is today.
Trustee Secret.
Okay, great. Good to know. Good to know. I don't know that. And just for 30 seconds, if I may, you brought up our sustainability action plan. That will be one of the items listed for under the capital improvement plan, and we have a proposal that will have a few options at the end as far as how you can get to our typical spending on our capital improvements. So, I feel like with the request that came in, it's going to be very manageable this year. So that's good news. Not every year can be said for that, but I think we have a good plan. But that would be incorporated in that. So we're trying to keep our at least the levy portion that goes towards the capital improvement, that's going to be very in line with what we've done in past years, based on the request that came in from department heads.
Trustee Owens?
I think I echo what Trustee Booker was saying. I give you a lot of credit, Taylor, because you're including the board at the beginning versus just throwing it at us at the end, and we're just rubber stamping it. So I think the way you got it laid out here, I give you 2 thumbs up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Trustee Thompson?
Trustee Owens said in addition to that, when it comes to the citizens' expectations, that when it comes to services that either improve or maintain the services provided, and when it comes to salaries and things of that nature, to make sure that they're competitive enough so that we don't hit an ebb and flows in the positions that we have that maintain the services that are provided.
Sure.
Trustee Quirk?
So in many years past, the village manager promised the community to keep the budget at no greater than 1%. increase. And, it was comfortable, then I think it became uncomfortable, and then I started arguing that it was too lean, and then at one point it felt skeletal. So, I don't think we can any longer expect just a 1% increase in the levy. I don't think the past village manager got much appreciation for doing that, and I think people misunderstand that there are other taxing entities other than the village. And so I think that taxes always go up, but the constraints that were sort of artificially imposed on the levy, you know, they clearly kept village taxes low, but I don't think that it was appreciated. And perhaps was at the expense of personnel that we needed. So, I'll look to see, how it comes out with your budget.
Sure. You know, I'll just do a quick preview of my assessment. From a staff-wise, if you're fully staffed right now, you know, we're probably at capacity for the most part. The problem is when you have an organization that goes through transition, it becomes very, no pun intended, taxing on them to try to fill the gaps. You know, there's other organizations throughout the Milwaukee metropolitan area that, you know, they kind of have that overlap, that buffer, where if you have a few vacancies, you can still make up for that. And here, I haven't seen that, and thankfully we have a lot of dedicated staff who have gone through those waves of transition, and despite the heavy pressure to still maintain what they're doing, but also cover for other people, they've been able to still, and it's cost them a lot of hours beyond the 40 hours. So that's something that we'll assess, especially when we look at the department budgets and their staffing. And I think there's some creative ways that we'll make sure that we keep the budget responsible for the taxpayers, but we want to create a little bit more flexibility that if we do have any of those transition periods, that we have a little bit more support to do that. So that would be in my 5-6 months, that's my brief assessment on that so far, going through that transition.
Anything else, Trustee Quirk?
No.
Trustee Johnson?
Yeah, I think for myself, what I kind of look at is you're offering a service right now, and if people are happy with that service, then you continue to offer that service. I guess from my perspective, if we're just offering a basic service and it's not meeting the needs of the community, then we need to up that service. Okay. And you need to think about how best to do that. So part of it is I don't see input from the residents. Maybe I'm missing it, that they get a chance to weigh in on what we're getting ready to vote on. Even though it's a very tight budget, but I think
there's a public hearing.
But I'm saying get it out ahead of time.
Yeah.
We hear from them.
So, if I can respond, because I've seen municipalities, they have the public hearing November 21st, and then if they hear a common theme, it's like, well, what do? We have this proposed budget in front of us. Like, do we have enough time to react and bring it back at a future meeting, which the next meeting would be in December, which typically we're trying to get tax bills ready. So, I think what we'll want to do is push it out in advance during the October sessions, and then if we hear those themes, that gives us a little bit of time to react to. So by the time it gets to the public hearing, hopefully we've already reacted to some of that. So my point would be we would do a total blitz through our communication, trying to promote the budget sessions. But then if people miss the budget sessions, they still have the public hearing to convey any of their thoughts and feelings on the budget.
Okay. Like that.
Okay.
Anything else, Trustee Johnson?
No, that's it.
A couple things that I missed in the earlier question. As we look at our budget, and I think a couple of these are Matthew's, the ash borer maintenance. I don't know why my watch does this. It picks up when I'm talking and it wants to repeat like it's talking to me. But anyway, just understanding where we are with that. And I know we've had discussions about Pierre, but Tyler and I talked last week, and I know it's been in, I think it's been in the CIP, the windows here in the village hall. It's been, and the right, right. So how do we get past the fur to really taking care of it?
We have a plan.
Well, there you go. And then, the lighting grid on Bradley. You know, we know that those businesses or residents are not paying for that. And
Correct.
How do we,
That's coming out of our general fund every year. Yep.
so how do we
Mhm.
sunset it and get it back to the people?
Mhm.
So those are some things. The other thing, you talked about it in terms of how do we make sure that people know this is going on? Blitzing, maybe having an open opportunity for people to submit their concerns. I think people want a lot until they find out they got to pay for it, and then they may back off. But then some people know this is what I want, but it may not be everybody in the community. So, yeah.
The other thing you'll see, I just want to be transparent, I think this year is going to be definitely more of a status quo budget.
Yeah.
You know, if there's new services you're looking to do, I think what we could do a community survey where if we can put together a question that basically states for this service you would be paying, you know, and your you know, let's say your property is $200,000 assessed, you would pay X amount more on your property tax bill. Would you be willing to do the service if you knew that was the price tag? And that's where we could use a community service or a community survey to get that out. You know, through the budget session, that's not necessarily a, you know, if we were doing something big like that, you want to get that feedback months and months
Right.
before.
Yeah.
And so those are, you know, if there's some big changes like that, you know, we may not see that in this budget, but when we, you know, get into quarter one, quarter two of 2023, we may be able to develop, you know, a community survey that would really lean into that with some specific dollars attached to it.
Like the leaf vacuum or
Like
whatever you
like a
call it.
leaf vacuum, leaf collection, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like a leaf collection discussion. Yeah, that would be something that would be more broad and
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. The other thing I think that we all need to be mindful of is that we have hired new positions, and we had to go with salaries that were competitive. So those salaries probably are not what they were last year. So when you're doing your budget.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, I think there are two more questions. Are there any specific changes you would like to see to the budget schedule or presentation compared to past years or what is presented to you tonight? And then what specific information would you like to be shared either prior to the budget sessions or during the budget sessions? And we've heard some of that tonight already, but is there anything related to the schedule that you'd like to see different in the schedules in our proposed in the document? And Darren is here, so he's hearing all of this that he's going to be doing. Or Derek. Any questions? Trustee Secrets or comments? Trustee Owens?
I just had a question, in terms of the, audit. I'd like to see the previous audit before the budget, so we can kinda see where we are.
Are you talking about the one that was 2020? Because
I guess
2020,
that's complete.
oh, so the 2021 audit won't be completed until the end of September based on the timeline that we're on. So, it's going to be done probably about a week before. Like, we might be finalizing the budget right when that 2021 comprehensive annual financial plan would be completed. We might, so I think what we could do is as long as we're meeting our time, I think we could just give both documents to you at the same time. I think I'm forecasting that presentation to be, the second, or your second typical meeting in September. or that third Monday in September is what I'm trying to say. So, so I think that could be done. Yeah.
Trustee Thompson? Trustee Quirk?
No comments on this question, no.
And Trustee Johnson?
I think you put together a very good game plan to help us out, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And that last question, is there any specific information you'd like to be shared prior to the budget sessions or during the budget sessions? And we can start with Trustee Johnson.
I don't have any.
All right. Trustee Quirk?
No, I have what I need.
Trustee Thompson? Trustee Owens? Trustee Sechrist? And Trustee Booker, is there any specific information you'd like to be shared either prior to the budget sessions or during the budget sessions? One question I do have, and I can't remember, do we show 2021? Not really 2022. Would we show 2021 budget?
So under each department, you would see the 21 well, hopefully we could show the 2020 actual. Hopefully we can show the 21 actual as long as the audit's done and gives us enough time to input that information. And then for 2022, you would see a projection
Right.
as well as the budgeted for 22.
I think that would be good, especially since we have several people that might be, this is their first time going through the budget to see, and knowing that we know there's going to be some changes with staffing, but in terms of the other expenses. Any other questions or comments? If not, this was agenda just as discussion. Tyler, did you have anything else you wanted to add? All right. And so then the final item on our agenda is official oath of Derek Danner as village treasurer. And so since he sat through all of this, he knows what the expectations are. He hasn't gotten up and left yet, so
They can raise your right hand in the air. I state your name.
I, Derek Danner,
Having been appointed to the office of Finance Director Treasurer,
have been appointed to the office of Finance Director Treasurer,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
all right. So that concludes our agenda to this point. The next item is to recess into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85(1)(e) for the following reasons: deliberating the investment of public funds as to which competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session, creation and funding of tax incremental financing district number 5. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved by Trustee Quirk and second by Trustee Thompson to go into closed session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. We will be going into closed session, so